Hey, my name is Vlandis, and I'm a piano instructor with Freeway Music. And I'm going to be using my series of these video lessons to teach you music theory through the piano. And we're going to be looking at ear training, analysis, improvisation, some basic technical things, and then of course anything else we pass along the way. So let's go ahead and get started today with a major scale. And I know that might sound boring to some of you, but we need some foundation that we can move on to. So we'll get more detailed in the next couple weeks, but here's a starting place. So we'll just start with the right hand and break down the C major scale note by note. So we're gonna start on C. We're gonna end on C, up one octave. And we're gonna play each note along the way. And when I say each note, I mean every letter name. So major scales will always use every letter name that we have available. I'm starting with C, of course, because it's all white keys on the piano and it's very easy to conceptualize in thought. So we're going to start with our thumb, just real quick, just in case. Piano fingerings, our thumb is always going to be number 1, index finger number 2, middle 3, ring 4, and then what's that, our pinky? Our pinky will be number 5. So always starting with your thumbs and working your way out. So back to right hand on the note C, we are going to play C, D, E, and at this point in the scale, for now, let's just pick up our hand. We're going to move our thumb to F and play the rest of our fingers. G, A, B, C. Now we're going to want to be able to do this forwards and backwards. So I'm going to take a moment just to play it. And I want you to really, focus in and listen to what the scale sounds like. So hopefully that sounds familiar to you. And if it doesn't, you want to get to a point where it does, so I might suggest singing along while you play it. So let's go ahead and look at the left hand now. The left hand, you may notice that our fingers, or our hands rather, are this mirror image of each other, right? There's some symmetry, but it's not transitional, but we have to make a mirror for this to work out. So in our left hand, we're going to start not with our thumb on C, but with our pinky, so finger 5 on C. And I'd recommend doing this an octave lower than where you just started. If you're unsure about what an octave is, just find the C you just played, and then look for the next one going down on the piano. So I started on middle C. This time I'm going to put my pinky on my left hand on the next C down. And that mirror analogy was to show that before we played 1, 2, 3 and then moved and played all 5, this time it's going to be the opposite. We're going to play 5 notes, and then we're going to move. Once we run out of fingers, we're going to pick up our hand and move our middle finger, that's finger 3, to the note A. And what we're really doing by doing that is we're setting up our thumb to the top of the scale where we want to end. So 5 on C, 4 on D, E, F, G. Now here's where we're going to move. I'm not so much thinking of getting my middle finger to A as I am of putting my thumb on C. So 3 on A, 2 on B, and 1 on C. And here's what that sounds like in one motion. So once you're able to play your C major scale in either hand, and it's very comfortable and it's very fluid, what I'd recommend is working it out hands together. Anything we can do with one hand, we should ideally be able to do with our other hand. And if we can do it with both hands separate, we should be able to do it hands together. So here's that scale, hands together. And you'll notice that our hands have to move at different times. So think about it ahead of time, but I don't recommend moving on at this point until it's very just natural to do one hand at a time. So there it is. That's just the basic C major scale. Let's take it one step further though. Because we play the piano, if we can do something in one octave, we're going to want to be able to do it in multiple octaves. So going back just to the right hand, let's take a peek now. How are we going to make the transition? At the top of the right hand, we ended on our pinky, and it's kind of a defining finger on our right hand, because once you get to your pinky, there's nowhere left to go. So we have to find a way around this. And what we're going to do is when we get to the top of the scale, let's pause on the note B. Now for a moment, what finger played C at the bottom? Because if there's anything we want to be in music, it's consistent. We want to have consistency. And a lot of times we need to practice this consistency on a small scale before we bring it to a large scale. So what's consistent here is going to be which finger played which notes. So we just stopped on B, and we're about to go to the next octave. But if I go to my pinky, I'm out. I can't go any further. So we're going to go to our thumb, and we can just start the whole sequence again. So then on the way back down, our thumb has a little bit more leeway. Unlike the pinky at the top of the hand, we're already used to, I'll call it crossing, but think of it maybe more of a shift or a lift. We're used to crossing over our thumb. So what we have to do now is we got to retrace our step. We're on C, we're on our thumb, and we need to go down one more octave. But what finger played that B on the way up the scale? So if you remember, it was our fourth finger. So we're going to go to our fourth finger now. And eventually you're going to want to get to a point where you can pretty much make that, your hand just kind of flip over itself. But for now, try to avoid getting your thumb underneath your fingers. And the way I would say to do that would just be to pick up your hand and slide it over. Now you'll notice we're at the same place earlier where we have this 5-finger pattern with our pinky on C. And we're just going to bring it back down all the way. 3, 2, 1. And if you've done this correctly, the same fingers have played the same notes up and down. Now similarly with the left hand, we're going to get to the top. This time, because our hands they're still inverse, nothing's changed, we have to think, I'm on my thumb on C, and it's perfectly okay to flip over the thumb, or to shift across. We've already done it to go up. What finger played D at the very bottom of the scale? Yeah, that's it, finger 4. So our fourth finger, or our ring finger, is going to be the one to shift over to D. And now we're going to be in the same position that we just were. The way back down, everything should stay consistent. And you end up at the bottom. So I'll go ahead and include a PDF with all the major scales and their fingerings, just for the sake of time, but download it, learn all those super critical information. Each key, once you get out of that sort of, maybe I'll call it the standard fingering, that C major fingering, once you get out of that, each scale is going to bring about a new challenge you're going to have to overcome just technically on the instrument, and just get used to it because that's the nature of the piano. Before we wrap up today, I want to break down sort of the intervallic structure of the major scale. Now, that's just fancy for what's the formula to make a major scale happen. And we're going to look at it in terms of whole steps and half steps. Maybe let's start with half steps. So half steps are the keys closest to one another. For instance, B to C, we have a half step. There's no key in between B and C. Now take C and D as our next example. There is a note in between there, so we don't have a half step. The half step from C would be C to C sharp or D flat, but we'll call it C sharp since we're ascending right now. And then C sharp to D would be a half step. So half step, half step, half step, just the notes closest to one another. A whole step, as you maybe have guessed, is 2 half steps. So our whole step from C would take us to D. Kind of like those 2 notes of the first 2 notes of the major scale. So we know it starts whole step because we got to skip 1 key here in the middle. And then it goes another whole step. Now E to F is just going to be a half step because there's no note in between. So far we have, starting on C, we have whole step to D, whole step to E, half step to F, whole step to G, whole step to A, whole step to B, and then we're going to close out with a half step to C. So we have whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. And you can start on any note of the major scale and you're going to come up with that same sound. For instance, if we were to do C sharp, or I'll call it D flat for now, but we'd have D flat, E flat, because we'd have to skip one in between for whole, and then whole step again, then half step, whole, 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 half. And that sound should be, again, super familiar, at least by the end of this video. I really hope that that's a familiar sound. All right, so what do I have? Let me check my sheet here.
So to wrap up today,
I want to close out with one more technique thing. So we looked at the major scale, looked at how to play it. There's one more thing that we're going to want to be able to do, and that's called an arpeggio. And for now, we'll keep it as simple as possible, and we're just going to say that an arpeggio is a chord, and a chord is just more than one note at a time. Well, an arpeggio is a broken chord, meaning, let's look at the chord first. So the chord, we were in C major. We're going to take the first note. We're going to skip the second, go to the third. So we have 1, we have 3, we're going to have 5. And if we play those 3 notes at the same time, we get a chord we'll call C major. And the arpeggio, all we're doing with an arpeggio is we're going to break it up and play them one note at a time. Again, in 2 octaves, you might notice. Because if we can do it in 1 octave, we want to be able to do it in multiple octaves. If we can do it with our right hand, we want to be able to do it with our left hand. And if we can do it hands separate, we want to be able to do it hands together. So in the right hand, our fingering for this arpeggio, so the notes are C, E, G, and we're going to play 1, 2, 3. And then that just repeats as many times as you want until you cap off on your pinky. Because remember, the pinky it's the end of our hand. It's where we stop to turn back around. And we just play it backwards. 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1. So just consecutive fingers. Not too bad. The left hand is a little bit different on this, where we're going to start on 5 again, because that's the equivalent of 1 on our right. So we're starting on 5, and then we're going to go to 4. It's a little bit weird to make that gap, but that's something you're just going to have to get used to. So 5, 4, 2, 1, 4, 2, 1, and then back down. It's 2, 4, 1, 2, 4, ending on our pinky. So one more time. And then both hands together. Here's our piano, tip for the day, is when whether you're playing the scale or the arpeggio, when your thumbs meet at the octave, so in the major scale, that's here, when your thumbs meet there, try to avoid really slamming down on that note C, right? It's super tempting because our thumbs are playing together, but also keep in mind that our thumbs are the heaviest part of our hand. Just think about the weighting of our hand being balanced around your pointer finger, right? If I hold my hand out and I rotate it for you, it rotates in its most still point around the pointer finger, not the middle finger, making our thumbs very heavy. So same thing with the arpeggio. When you meet up at the octave, you don't want to slam into that note. You just want to make it sound like it's part of an overarching system. Same thing with the scales. Other than that, I'll put the arpeggio fingerings in a separate PDF, but still attached in the description below. And I hope you guys tune back in again next week. And what I've got planned for next week is to break down all the chords in the major scale. So thank you for joining me today. I hope you got something out of this, and I hope to see you again next week.